Before I call our next speaker, probably let me give you some insights on our topic today. While there are many important trends in the workplace for human resource directors and talent and learning officers, a prevailing theme for the next several years will be the redesigning the notion of the workplace experience through the use of design principles. How do you make your employees feel good at work? Well, we have someone who has the answers to these questions and to many others. She's in charge of a big chunk of Sodexo revenue and manages 140,000 people worldwide. I would like to call on stage the CEO Worldwide Corporate Services at Sodexo, Sylvia Metayer. Thank you, Sylvia. Thank you for joining me here. It's great to have you here today. Well, as a service delivering company in workplaces around the world, I believe that you have been working on employee journey in the workplace for a while now. So could you probably tell us a bit more about what you do?
Okay, so hello everybody. I'm quite intimidated. I feel like Daniel in the den of lions with all these HR people around me. So I'm going to be talking about things which you're probably a lot more expert in than I am. Maybe quickly to give some statistics. Sodexo is present in 80 countries. We have, as you said, 140. I manage 140,000 people, but we have nearly 500,000 in the workforce. And in my line of work, we serve what we call corporate services clients, so we look at adults at work. And in the last 2 years, we've said, you know, what is this workplace experience, which was talked about in the Accenture study, and how can we contribute to it? Why is it important? And what are the things that are really driving the way people see the workplace?
All right, so why did you actually do this piece of research? As far as I know, you're not a survey research company, so why this move?
Well, I think when you have nearly 500,000 employees, really understanding what the future of work is going to be is actually important. So we asked ourselves the questions for ourselves. And then I personally led this study, and I said, you know, we also observe probably 25 to 30 million adults at work every day through our teams. So is there something to learn there? And then thirdly, we have a very wide web of people that we interact with. And so we had the great privilege of having, you know, more than 50 top experts work with us on this. And what we found, which was mind-blowing to me, because, you know, in 60 countries, I would have thought every country would be a bit different, is that these trends that came out, there's 10 of them, and I can tell you that from Brazil to Sweden, from Qatar to India, from France to Mexico, maybe France is always a bit different, but even there, you actually do find these trends, and they're not just the summation, the statistical summation of the 10 top trends. They are the trends that we see everywhere, what people are seeing as going to be happening in the world of work.
So how would you define work experience, I mean, at Sodexo?
So, work experience at Sodexo, or how would Sodexo define work experience?
As you wish.
So I think work experience was defined very well. I love that that definition that was given by our speaker from Accenture, which is essentially the holistic experience that you have and that you sense as you are at work. But we work in a place, and so the notion of workplace experience is how does the place in which you do your work, how does that influence the experience of the human being who's actually doing the work?
So what we spoke about, I mean, when we met, I remember you spoke a lot about experience design. So what is that exactly?
I think experience is a fact and design is a choice. You will experience work, whatever happens. You're a human being, you experience, you sense. The idea of experience design, and this actually doesn't come from Sodexo, right? It's something that people in technology have been doing a long time and in retail, is there a way to actually design what happens so that the experience is a positive experience and is the experience that you need to have? So this is what we mean by experience at work. It's not just how cool your offices are. It's not just how it's the way in which the services that are given to you as an employee impact the way that you feel about yourself and the way that you feel about your relationship with your company.
Right, probably in a typical workplace, your regular office environment, company's headquarters, how would you define experience design? You spoke about the body check thing, but how would you define?
Well, first of all, I do want to say that offices and headquarters are not typical workplaces for two reasons. First of all, because flexibility means that a lot of people work at home, so home is a workplace, and therefore the technology that allows you to connect is part of the workplace experience. And there are more people who work in factories, R&D centers, and call centers than in office space. Having said this, to answer your question, it's about the journey. So I think talking about the Dorchester, there was this really lovely thing about the journey of a guest. So if you consider that you have an employee and that employee is having a journey through the workplace or through the office, how do you design that? How do you design, and it was talked about from Microsoft, how you enter through a security, when you check in at the lobby. Mm-hmm. Do people actually recognize your badge or not? This thing about having badges that you lose and that nobody knows who you are when you're part of of a company, that has to change. There are different ways of doing it. How would you go about thinking of that whole journey? And I think there are two things here. One was touched upon by the speaker from Microsoft, which is you have to engage the people who are experiencing the journey. With that difficulty that was talked about by the Accenture speaker, which is if you have 6,000 people on a site and they all have a journey, how do you make it collective? And then the third thing, which is powerful, was that it is actually a process. And what I say to my clients, and I say it to the CEOs of my clients, you're a CEO, you're really intelligent, you're really smart, but you're not smart about this, right? Just because you think it's cool to have green cushions everywhere doesn't mean that that's what your employees think. So there's a process around experience design by which you can guide that thinking and you can have it therefore be designed in a holistic way to an outcome.
Right, so it's the same experiences, whether in a typical place, we said that, it's not a typical place though, or in a manufacturing plant, this would be exactly the same kind of process.
It's the same process, but what you have to have is the humility to understand that this is for the employee, not for the top management, and that therefore the journey may be very different depending whether you're an insurance broker, coming into an office, or a factory worker coming into production site, or a scientist coming in to do lab testing.
Right, so what are the implications of experience design for human resource in learning and development?
Guys, I have to say this to you, we need you, right? Because you, on the whole, are not present in workplace design choices. And I was really happy to see it as part of the Microsoft presentation, but HR is not at the table in many of the decisions that are made, whether that's choice of building, renovations of buildings, space management and allocation, and you have to be in the conversation.
You mean HR withdraw from the conversation too often?
I don't know whether they withdraw, whether they're not included. The people in this room would probably have a personal opinion. I do think, as an ex-finance person, that because there are major finance decisions to be made, it means that HR and finance have to work together.
And
I don't know.
Shouldn't let
easy.
Finance lead it, guys. Listen to her.
No,
right.
please. This is your space.
Right. So, how do you see this field evolving in the coming years? How would you imagine actually the ideal future workplace?
If I knew what the ideal future workplace would be, I'd quit my job right now and I'd do something else. But I just so deeply feel that if we can get to a society or to ways of working where the employee is at the heart of the experience that is built in the workplace, you know, the figure that I have always in my mind, I was doing this with a client in a lab setting, you can imagine a lab with millions of pounds of investment, and we together found out that for every investment in the space or in the machinery or in the equipment, the HR investment in the scientist was 10x. And so my ideal workplace of the future is where the real investment that companies make, which is not in equipment, which is not in places, which is not in machines, because the real investment that you make is in people, that investment is at the heart of the strategy of how you define a workplace.
Mm-hmm. I really enjoyed when we met, you said something, in workplace there's work and place, where are the people? So we need to redefine and find a new word where we put people in workplace somewhere. Right.
Put the people in the workplace. Please do it.
You can tweet if you have some great ideas, so we bet. So Sylvia, as a CEO, what advice would you like to give to HRD and learning and development people today in this room, if you had?
I think the advice I would give is to read our workplace trends report, which is available online. I would advise you to look at design thinking and experience design as a way of interacting with your employees in terms of workplace. And I would, I can't say it enough, I would urge you to bring that holistic view that you have of talent, not just of processes, to the table with your CEOs. And I speak as a CEO. I desperately need, for instance, to have my HR teams around me to help me understand the world of the future. The world of work in the future is going to change so tremendously that if you're not at the table, this will not happen in the way that's right for the employees.
Right, Sylvia, I know that there's a workshop with Talentsoft coming up soon in September. Could you probably give us a quick insight?
Yes, so because there is quite a process around design thinking, we're really happy as a sort of a post-event to this day. For those of you who are interested, we'll hold a workshop to show you actually how you can do design, experience design in the workplace.
Right, Sylvia, I don't know if you want to add something. We have some time, so if you want to say something to the people here before we end.
Yes, I'd like to maybe share just one thing, which is a little bit about experience and workplace and very much about the future of work, which is this fear and this unknown that we face around automation, robotization, digitization. I would like for our next workplace trends report, if there are people in this audience who believe that they have some view that they can help us explore, I would like to explore that. It has a lot of implication for the workplace because it tells you who's going to be there and what they're going to do. Are they going to be robots? Are they going to be people? What kind of experience? But also because as we look at the future of work for Sodexo, and if we just give a number and say, I don't know, 25% of tasks are going to be automated in the next 10 years or 5 years, I've heard some say, we have 500,000 people working for Sodexo, so you can imagine the social implication of that. And I'm not convinced from what I've read, and you may have a different view as an HR community, that people really understand the social magnitude of what is going to happen when robotization and automation really hits us hard. So that would be a final point.
Thank you very much, Sylvia, for sharing Sodexo's vision. Thank you for being with us. It was a real honor to have you here today.